7th grade Geometry Standard 1 involves computing actual lengths and areas from a scale drawing and creating a scale drawing. In this standard, students will use their knowledge of proportions from 6th grade to transition into similarity and dilations into 8th grade. Students in 7th grade will use proportions to create a scale drawing. As they do this, you want your students to think critically about what changing the scale of an image does to the image, and you want them to focus on the sides and angles of the image. For this task, students will create a scale drawing of a candy wrapper.
I made a centimeter by centimeter grid on this candy bar, and I used a ruler and divided it up by centimeters.
After students select the object that they're going to use for their scale factor project, students are instructed to make a centimeter by centimeter grid over the top of their object using a ruler or a meter stick. For students who struggle with making a grid on their candy wrapper, provide them with a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter grid paper, have them tape their candy wrapper down, and they can use the grid lines on the paper to help them draw a correct grid on their candy wrapper.
We had to figure out the length of the paper and the length of the candy to figure out how big the squares would be on the paper. So the length of our paper was 75 and the length of our candy was 15. We know that 1 centimeter on the candy wrapper is 5 centimeters on the paper.
I'm doing the torch grid drawing and enlarging it onto a bigger paper. And our scale factor is 5 centimeters for every 1 centimeter on here. It's 5 centimeters on the big paper.
So right now, what are you doing on your paper?
I'm making tick marks for every 5 centimeters so we can make it into a square.
Great. After students have determined their scale factor, they will take a large sheet of white paper and create a grid at their scale factor to prepare to reproduce their image. If you have students who struggle with taking their grid and placing it on a large piece of white paper, provide them with a large sheet of gridded paper. This particular paper is measured in 1 inch by 1 inch squares. For this example, I combined 2 of the squares to give me a total of 5 centimeters. Students will take their 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter object, in this case it's a candy wrapper, and convert it to a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter grid. So it would give them a ratio of 1 to 5. This allows students who struggle to be more accurate and precise in their drawings. As the students reproduced their image at a larger scale factor, they paid particularly close to each individual square. They reproduced the image square by square, paying close attention to the angles of the image and the lines of the image, and trying to do an exact duplication of each square at a larger scale factor. After a lot of hard work, students show off their completed projects. It's important for math teachers to be aware of the standards of mathematical practice when planning tasks for students in the classroom. The second standard asks students to reason abstractly and quantitatively. This standard requires for students to represent their problem in a variety of ways. Students in this task were required to use proportions to show how they were going to enlarge their candy wrapper, and then they had to show this through their end product of the dilated image. Mathematically proficient students communicate precisely to others and attend to precision in their thinking. For this project, students had to check and double-check calculations, and they also had to complete visual checks to ensure their larger project looked similar to their smaller wrapper. In this task, students will create a turkey at a larger scale factor. I selected a turkey for this task because my students completed this activity around Thanksgiving. Any object or cartoon will work for this task. One quick and easy way to modify the scale drawing activity for students is to provide them with an image that is already placed on 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter grid paper. When I modify this activity for students, I also go ahead and set the scale for them. In this case, I'm providing them with a blank sheet of paper, and the scale that we're going to be using is a 1 centimeter to 1 inch ratio. Students will then take the turkey and create this turkey on the blank sheet of paper at a larger scale. Here are some pictures of student work samples as they work throughout this project. Standard 1 requires students to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Mathematically proficient students start by explaining to themselves the meaning of the problem and look for an entry point to its solution. For this particular task, students had to design a plan to enlarge their object, and they had to be able to communicate that plan to the members of their group. Standard 6 requires for students to attend to precision. In this project, students had to complete visual checks to make sure that their larger object was similar to their smaller object. For Task 3, students will use a map of the United States and proportions to determine the distance between two cities. For this task, students are given a map of the United States with state capitals listed. On the map, students are given a key, and the key shows that approximately 1 inch is equal to 300 miles. For this task, students are using various different capitals from various different states to determine the distance between those. And without using a ruler, they will estimate the distance on the map and use their scale factor and proportions to help determine an estimate of the actual distance. This student used a Post-it note to measure off the distance of the scale on the map. She drew a line between the two cities she was measuring, and then she placed the Post-it note over top of the line. She measured that the two cities were a little over 2 of the units apart. She reduced it down to a half, and then she further reduced it down to a fourth. Standard 1 requires students to make sense of problems and persevere. In the map activity, students had to design a plan to determine the distance accurately between two cities, and then they had to analyze this information. Standard 5 requires students to use appropriate tools strategically. In this standard, students should be able to use the tools and then tell why they use them. With the map activity, students were not allowed to use a ruler. Most students used the method of a piece of paper with measure marks on the paper so that they could estimate the distance between two cities.